We are back on the Spin Room. Thanks for staying with us. It's not easy being a candidate for the U.S. Senate running on the GOP line in a blue state, certainly not when it's probably the bluest state of them all, New York. But one candidate is not deterred and giving it her best shot against sitting Democrat Senator of New York, Kirsten Gillibrand. I'm very honored to be joined by Republican candidate for that seat, Chele Farley. Chele, thank you very much for coming on the Spin Room. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Ami, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And actually, I don't think it's such a long shot race. I think we have a real opportunity, and one of the biggest differences between Kirsten Gillibrand and myself is our positions on Israel. She's been crazy in the sense that she voted for the Iran nuclear deal. When I was in Israel in May for the 70th anniversary, I called on the president to get out of the deal, which he did. She also refused to vote for the Taylor Force Act. Right. And then she put her name on the anti-BDS legislation, which I absolutely support, and then quietly took her name off of it.
Well, okay, before we get to Israel, I want to actually start, you mentioned Gillibrand, of course. She's a rising star in the Democratic Party. Right now, she has a 30-point lead, according to Real Clear Politics, and nearly $11 million in her campaign's back pocket. So what's your strategy to appeal to voters who haven't elected a Republican to the U.S. Senate since Alfonso D'Amato finished his term in 1999?
Well, Ami, I think that we have a different race, again, because Kirsten Gillibrand has literally only passed one bill in the 11.5 years that she has been 2 years in the House and 9.5 years in the Senate. And I think New Yorkers don't want somebody who is thinking about higher office. Everyone is talking about her as a presidential contender. They want someone who's actually going to represent the people of their state. And as we talked about, somebody who actually has their values. In every poll, I am getting closer and closer. It's actually down to about 20 points, but that poll is a month ago. And since then, I've been, doing TV ads. The president was out here supporting the whole congressional candidates, and gave me a wonderful shout out and endorsement. And I think we're really getting a lot of traction, and we're going to show people that there is a viable candidate, and New York deserves someone who can work with the administration and get things done.
Do you still feel comfortable receiving that praise and endorsement from Donald Trump after his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has said under oath that the president ordered him to pay hush money to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal? Do you still feel comfortable?
I feel comfortable because he's the president of the United States. We're a country of laws. If he broke a law, he will have to account for that. But right now, we need to work together with the administration. And New York has a senator who cannot work with the administration. I mean, she sat on her hands with this tax bill, which frankly is very tough on New York. It was good for a lot of people, but New York, as we know, is a high tax state with the highest taxes in the entire country. And losing that federal tax deduction cold turkey was incredibly difficult, especially with a cap of only $10,000 a year. The average property tax bill in Westchester County is $19,000 a year. In fact, they did a study of the property taxes by county in the entire country, and unfortunately, New York had 9 out of the top 10 highest counties paying property taxes. It's crazy. If she could have easily voted and changed that cap from $10,000 to $20,000, but she didn't. That's what I'll do when I get in there. So you started talking about Israel before, and there's a large Jewish community in New York, and you voiced your support for moving the embassy from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv in May. But seeing as how it hasn't really resulted in the renewal of peace talks with Palestinians, the whole process is stalled, do you still believe it was a good decision? I do, absolutely. But I think there's also a lot to be said when you say you're going to do something, you do it. I mean, there were countless presidents before who all had the same comment, that they were going to move the embassy in Jerusalem, and they didn't. And I sat down with Ambassador Friedman for an hour and a half when I was in Jerusalem in May, and he talked about how it happened. And people had said, oh, it would take 10 years, it would cost $1 billion. And he said quietly, well, we already have a consulate in Jerusalem. Why don't we just slap the word embassy on it and call it a day? And I think this is the kind of outside-the-box thinking that non-career politicians can bring to Washington. And I have not run for office before. This is a real opportunity. I think we need to do things that that make sense and that are less expensive and resolve issues. The other big thing that I talk about all the time is term limits. I've said that I would only serve 2 terms. I think 12 years is long enough. And after that, it is time for somebody else with fresh ideas, lots of energy and enthusiasm to get in there.
Chele, the president said this week that Israel would have to pay a high price for that embassy move. What do you think that price will be?
I have no idea. But I certainly will, when I'm in Washington, work to make sure that, I represent my constituents. And as you pointed out, the second largest number of Jews, in the world live in New York.
Right. Speaking of, relations with between American Jews and Democrats and Republicans to Israel, there was a Gallup poll that was released this week showing how the Israeli prime minister is viewed by Republicans and Democrats, and we're seeing it now on screen, really showing how bipartisan he and Israel have become. 64% of Republicans have a favorable attitude for Netanyahu, and only 17% of Democrats. Why is that? And when, in your opinion, did Israel become such a partisan issue?
I don't know, and frankly, it shouldn't be. I mean, I actually think there is too much, partisanship in politics in general. Your viewers may not know this, but I'm married to a Democrat. And people always say, how can you reach across the aisle? And I said, what are you talking about? I reach across the kitchen table every night. I think this is what we need to do. We need to work together. And I do think that getting, rid of a lot of career politicians would help. Putting in term limits. People want to have an issue that they can continue to, campaign on. But if you're only going to be in there for 2 terms, you want to get things done and then get home. And that's certainly the way I feel. And that's what I'll do when I go to Washington.
Right. There's been some talk about efforts in the House and Congress to support recognition of Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. John Bolton also talked about that when he was here recently in Israel. What's your position on that? Would you support recognition of the Golan Heights, Israel's sovereignty there at least?
Actually, I think the Israeli people have to make that determination for themselves. This is not something that I think that, an American living in New York should determine.
Okay. All right. That's all the time that we have. I want to thank you, Chele Farley. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. It's great being here, and I look forward to my next visit to Israel.
We'll see you there. We'll see you soon. Thank you very much.